I want to say thank you for joining me in this series. I'm very passionate about this topic, as you're going to find out. And it's basically a masterclass in regenerative healing potential. So I'm going to start by showing you some mind-blowing case studies for recovery potential with comparisons to what is considered normal or even extraordinary in clinical results. Then we'll move into the framework of the integrated methodology I use called the RAM method. So this first video in the series will start with a deep dive to help you understand the role of numerous peptides within the framework. The following videos will continue with peptides, but also cover how their signals interplay with the other modalities that can take recovery to an entirely new level through electrical, photons, or acoustic fields, along with supplementation for the raw materials and enhancing the environmental terrain. That is a big miss. If your environment and cells aren't able to receive the signals, your peptides can be virtually useless. And finally, we'll cover the often misunderstood mechanisms of modifying training to achieve some of the same signals as peptides. Yeah, that's right, but in a non-redundant, amplified manner. Now, I've used the word potential quite specifically in this intro, as this video is not prescriptive nor medical advice. And while this channel's name may seem leading, my awards for scientific innovation and lifetime achievement come from my background in engineering, not medicine, as it relates to biomechanics. However, I think you'll find that my 20+ years of experience with peptides provides value, sharing what I've seen with various compounds and protocols I've developed and used with those I've mentored in the field. With this series, you'll see a continuous theme with my work, and it stems from the view of signal transduction theory, which certainly played a role in how I've looked at things in the exercise, movement, and neurology world that I'm most known for, but it's going to explain how I integrate them in with peptides, supplements, and other modalities we're going to dive into. Part 1, Redefining Healing. What you just saw was world's strongest man competitor, Trey Mitchell, and he ruptured his Achilles, ripped it off the bone, right? That in that sport is usually a career-ending injury. And when we talk about the standard motto of medical care, you're going to see what I'm talking about. Trey was back, recovered within a matter of months. And in fact, he was competing at 6 months and was setting records. He was doing PRs. He was stronger than he ever was before. So when we look at those standard medical protocols, like Ohio State College of Medicine, for example, they expect 6 to 9 months just for the structural healing and 9 to 12 months before an athlete returns to full sport. Even then, it's mixed results. So a meta-analysis of data shows the average return to play at about 6 months. And that has roughly half of patients still unable to perform a single heel raise at like 12 weeks post-op. And long after discharge from the program, 10 to 30% still have calf strength deficits. So when we're talking about recovering and competing at that level at that time, that's not really heard of. I mean, gait training, range of motion, and progressive loading usually don't even begin until 6 to 12 weeks, and tendon elongation remains to be a complication for up to 6 months, even when they've done early mobilizations. So when we say 6 months, and understand he had to train to get back and compete by that point in time, in the traditional world, that means limping back to normal, not breaking records. But let's take this even a step further. I want you to look at Travis Rogers here. So Travis had a double quad rupture, and I mean, that's unable to walk. He's in a wheelchair, and he went from this. At 12 weeks, Travis was deadlifting 700 pounds. And shortly after that, he totaled 2138 as a 220-pound powerlifter. It's a frame of reference. If you look at a distribution chart like this one, you will see that is, we can't even read how far out the 0.00001% of the population for strength. So this is a severe injury. So there's not many to pull from. So I've got a chart of 3 different comparable case studies, right? So we can look at the first one, this Gare et al. 2009, and we can take this at face value. I mean, it's a straightforward review of 39 plus surgical cases, and it shows that we'd call the standard outcome with people beginning to walk at 2 months, like being released to be able to walk 2 miles. So that gives you an idea of the difference here. Rohr et al. 2017. This is a really interesting one. Looks fine on paper until you get past the summary, because what we see is a breakdown of the data that 31.6% reported persistent pain and stiffness in their knees. And another 8% with pain without stiffness, and 10% had stiffness without pain. That's exactly half the people. 50% continued living with some degree of reduced function. And here's the kicker. 36% of people of that group never returned to sport at all. And they cited the tendon rupture as the reason. Think about that. I mean, in real world terms, 1 out of 3 never made it back. And we're talking about Travis with zero pain, zero lack of range of motion, setting records, competing at a phenomenal level within weeks. It is theoretically impossible based on review of literature or speaking with anyone in the standard medical realm. So this one, the last study, that one was just a single 27-year-old man, ruptured his quad tendon stepping off a stair. I think what was noted here is they considered this recoverable favorable, right? And look at the length of time for recovery. 19 months is considered favorable. I admit there is a lot of information on this graphic, but it represents the framework that I use to articulate the entire system we're going to address through this multi-part series. The first category covers the peptides and growth factors. These activate receptor pathways, drive protein synthesis, angiogenesis, inflammation control, and cellular repair. The next is equally important, and this is key interferons and signaling through pulsed electrical, acoustic, and photonic fields. These modalities improve cellular efficiency, circulation, energy production, and repair mechanisms through both mechanical and bioelectric stimulation. Third, we look at using supplements to enhance the terrain, improving tissue quality and its responsiveness to these signals, while also priming the system for greater signal clarity. This includes providing the raw materials the body needs to carry out those repair and adaptation processes. And finally, although this could easily come first, because this is a continuous loop the way it's represented, we address mechanical loading methods. These are often misunderstood training approaches that you can generate the same molecular signals through tension and strain and metabolic stress. That's right. In other words, how the training itself can be modified to drive similar adaptation pathways and growth factors, or how we clear neurological threat systems so that we can free up our movement or sensations of pain. I'm cutting out 8 minutes of case studies so as not to bore the hell out of you. And I'm going to jump straight into the peptides and save the alternative modalities in the RAM method for after that, because that's probably why many of you are here. But trust me, it's worth it. Please wait, and you're going to see the really uniqueness of how the system fits together. Now, of the case studies, I do want to show you just one short clip. This is my elbow here, and it's 3 weeks post-surgery done by the top guy at Curlin Jobe, so arguably the best elbow surgeon in the U.S. Full open surgery, nerve transposition, and the most challenging elbow he's ever had. And you can see both the skin, and I was doing full body hangs with rotations at 3 weeks out, basically fully healed. So, clip.
Yeah, just over 3 weeks. Completely healed.
Well, it's time for that disclaimer. And this isn't just a technicality. It's something I feel is important. And I want to be clear. I'm not a medical professional, and nothing in this content should be taken as medical advice. Even the name of this channel could be misunderstood. So to clarify, my background, awards for scientific innovation, patents, and lifetime achievement are all within the scope of my engineering background in my design of biomechanical-based training equipment and education, not medicine. That said, I do believe there's tremendous value in sharing my observational data and insights from over 20 years of experience working with peptides, both personally and with a vast array of clients and the professionals that I've mentored. The protocols and experiences I share are meant purely for educational and research discussion to help others doing research expand their understanding of what's possible. And that's the key. These are research peptides being discussed, and anyone engaging in this kind of work must understand and accept the inherent risks involving conducting research. So let's jump straight into what everyone wants to talk about, peptides. Why? They're new. They're hot. What everybody's talking about. Well, the thing is, they're not new at all. The first peptide was insulin, developed back in 1923. By the mid-1900s, there were more peptides being used and explored, and as the cost and technology to synthesize them improved through the 1990s and early 2000s, peptide research exploded. And that's actually when I got started about 20 years ago, as I'm sure I've mentioned a bunch of times. Now, many of these first set that I'm going to be talking about, you probably heard of. So I'm going to take some time to prepare some analogies so you can take away, hopefully, a deeper understanding. But first, I want to recap just some peptide basics. Let's start by defining exactly what a peptide is. At its simplest, a peptide is a short chain of amino acids. Yes, that's right, the same building blocks as that form protein. But unlike protein, which is long, folded, and complex structure, a peptide is a small bond of amino acids, typically 2 to 50 units long. And that smaller structure gives peptides major advantages. They're more stable. They clear more quickly, so you have less toxicity and accumulation. They can penetrate into tissue and the cell membranes more effectively. And we can really target what we're doing with them. So here's a part that you want to visualize. A peptide is like a text message. It's a short, clear, succinct, and specific message, and it tells your body, do this right here, right now. While a protein, on the other hand, is like a novel, long, intricate, layered with meaning. So what we're going to do is imagine your body as a city. That entire city, the roads, the power grid, the water system, that's the full novel. Inside that city is a house that's been damaged. A tendon strain, a surgical incision, or inflammation in the gut. Peptides are that text message that sends the repair crew. Here's where the problem is. Bring the right materials and fix it this way. And that's what makes them so powerful. They can be targeted with precision. Low accumulation and toxicity, penetrating cell membranes due to the small size, allowing you to target multiple pathways. That's how you should think about them. Targeted biological communication. So we're going to start with one of the most powerful, best research healing compounds that you've certainly heard of, BPC 157. Stands for Body Protective Compound 157. BPC is derived from a natural protective peptide found in the human stomach. It plays a key role in maintaining the integrity of the gut lining, but it also has a systemic effect throughout the entire body. I call BPC 157 the site foreman. He's the blueprint reader, organizing the crews, directing the repair process. BPC communicates directly with the fibroblasts, the cells responsible for laying down new collagen and connective tissue, and tells them exactly where to go, what to build, and it also promotes angiogenesis. This is the growth of new micro blood vessels that deliver oxygen and nutrients to the injured tissue. And that's what makes it so powerful for tendon, ligament, nerve, and muscle repair. And it's one of the few compounds that can directly improve gut integrity while also enhancing that systemic recovery through the whole body. How BPC works and how to use it. Here's where it gets interesting. It can work systemically, as I mentioned, through the bloodstream, but it also works locally when placed near the specific injury. It can be taken orally, but only if it's bound to an arginate salt. That stabilizes it against the digestion process and allows it to reach and repair that gut lining. Oral BPC in that form is absolutely phenomenal for leaky gut, gastric inflammation, and any digestive-related systemic inflammation. However, when we're talking about soft tissue injuries, tendons, ligament, muscle, post-surgical sites, subcutaneous and intramuscular injections tend to be more effective. When injected subcutaneously, BPC distributes through that local tissue layer and interacts with the receptors near the injection site. And because it stimulates angiogenesis, injecting it into or adjacent to that damaged area helps the body build those new microvessels that accelerate that local repair. This is why many people prefer to place it as close as possible or in the injury site. You're essentially concentrating that single signal where it's needed most. Typical dosing and frequency. BPC has a short half-life, which means its effects taper off quickly. That's not a flaw. That's what makes it safe and precise. Typical dosing is 350 to 500 mcg twice per day. Once in the morning, once in the evening. Timing around food, all that other stuff doesn't matter. That twice daily rhythm keeps the signal active and consistent without causing the receptors to fatigue. If you're using a combined blend that already includes BPC, you'll follow that same schedule. But if you're using it for maintenance or low-grade inflammation rather than an acute injury, you might drop it to once per day to be sufficient. But the true regenerative effects, twice daily, is optimal. For the post-surgical applications or major tendon repairs, I often recommend 2 weeks of preloading before surgery to prime the tissue for angiogenesis and collage alignment. And remember, because BPC increases blood flow and vessel formation, injecting intramuscularly near the injury can help those effects localize even further. So if we go back to that construction site analogy, BPC, the foreman of the site, he's reading the blueprints, coordinating the crews, and signaling where the raw materials need to go. He doesn't bring the concrete or steel. That's your body's job. But he makes sure the right workers show up at the right place to start repairing that damage efficiently. BPC restores organization to the healing process. It improves communication between growth factors, increases fibroblast migration, aligns collagen fibers, and builds that microcirculation that supports everything else. And that's why it pairs so well with the other peptides like TB500, GHK-Cu, and KPV. Each one adds another layer of precision and synergy to this process. But everything begins with the BPC signal. It's the first tech message that starts the rebuild. Now that we've covered BPC, the foreman, the blueprint reader, let's move to the next compound in the RAM framework. That's TB500, known as thymosin beta 4 fragment. While BPC tells the crews where to work, TB is the architect and the logistics manager who brings the supplies and designs the scaffolding that holds everything together. What is TB500 and how does it work? It's a synthetic fragment of a naturally occurring protein, thymosin beta 4, which is found in nearly every cell in the human body, especially concentrated in your platelets. It plays a central role in the cell migration, angiogenesis, and tissue regeneration. And where BPC organizes the response, TB expands the reach and speed of that repair. TB binds structurally to a protein called actin, which makes up about 10% of the protein inside a cell. Actin is what gives your cell the shape, the ability to move, and the ability to divide. When TB binds to actin, it enhances that system, allowing cells to move, divide, and repair faster. And that's what makes it so effective for soft tissue repair, post-surgical recovery, and even maintaining workload during heavy training. Backing up to our construction analogy, BPC is the foreman, TB is the architect who lays out the structure of the new build, and the logistic coordinator who gets the materials where they need to go. He's the one that expands the blueprint into the 3D model. Here's how this building is going to take shape. He also improves the road that the workers get there on, those roads being the blood vessels and the extracellular matrix. So TB drives angiogenesis, the formation of those microcapillaries, expanding circulation throughout the injury zone, which means improved oxygen, nutrient delivery, and cell waste removal. This is essential for true regeneration. TB500 benefits extend far beyond the initial repair signal. Here's what it does. It enhances cell remigration, especially fibroblasts and stem cells, so they can reach the injury quickly. Reduces fibrosis in scar tissue, which keeps that repaired tissue flexible and functional. That's what you saw on my elbow. It lowers the systemic inflammation, complementing the effects of BPC and KPV. It increases angiogenesis, building new vessels and restoring flow where it's been lost. It improves endurance and workload tolerance, allowing athletes and patients to continue light movement through recovery without regression. And together with BPC, now you have a team on site that's not only organized, it's expanding the infrastructure. BPC administration and timing. It can be administered subcutaneously or intramuscular, depending on the target tissue. For general systemic repair, post-surgical healing, subcutaneous injections are perfectly effective. For localized high-demand sites, tendons, ligaments, or deep muscle tissue, intramuscular delivery can better concentrate those efforts, but it's mostly known to work systemically, so you don't have to directly inject it into the injury for benefit. But local placement can accelerate. At least that's what I've observed. For surgical cases, I recommend starting TB roughly 2 weeks before surgery to prime the tissue for angiogenesis, reduce the inflammation response, and speed that post-operative process. That way, your body enters the surgical event already prepared to repair. Dosing guidelines. Typical dosing for TB500 is around 1,000 micrograms per day. So if we're got a blend, you divide that up into 500 twice a day because we're probably combining it with the BPC 157. But again, if they're separate, you can do 1,000, or we can even actually average that over a few days. In more intensive recovery windows like post-surgery or after an acute injury, you can use an initial front loading phase. So administering even 5,000, 10,000 micrograms per week the first 2 weeks before tapering to that steady 1,000 microgram dose. However, with the peptide blends, I've really found that with those other components, I don't have to do that much anymore. But that was often a strategy in the earlier days when we didn't have the additional compounds available. Let's talk about what you should feel. People often report noticeable improvements in joint mobility, tissue elasticity, pain reduction within the first few weeks. And it's not just about fast healing, it's about high quality healing. The tissue you rebuild under the influence of TB500 tends to be more organized, better vascularized, and more functional with what forms without it. And that's the point of regenerative medicine. Not just healing fast, but healing right. Quick recap of where we're at so far. BPC calls in the crews and tells them where to work. TB500 gives them a clean work site, clear roads, fresh materials, and better blueprints. It binds to actin and accelerates the cellular movement. It stimulates angiogenesis for nutrient delivery, reduces fibrosis to keep the tissue supple and strong. And together, these two peptides form the backbone of recovery phase in the regenerative amplification model. They're precise, synergistic, highly adaptable, and whether you're recovering from an injury or preparing for surgery, or just supporting a heavy training cycle without breaking down. All right, we've taken care of the basics. We've got a great house being built. It's time to take it to another level. What do? Bring in the master craftsman. This would be GHK-Cu, also known as copper peptide. What is it? How does it work? GHK-Cu is a naturally occurring tripeptide, a short 3 amino acid sequence of glycine, histidine, and lysine, and it binds to a copper ion. That copper connection is what gives the molecule its powerful regenerative properties. GHK is found throughout the body, in plasma, saliva, wound fluid, and levels naturally decline as we age. When we restore those levels through supplementation, we reactivate a huge range of repair and protective systems that tend to go dormant over time. In fact, GHK is one of the few compounds that can turn on and off thousands of genes related to healing, inflammation, and cellular regeneration. It literally rewrites the biological instruction manual for repair. Here's what GHK-Cu does in practical terms. It stimulates collagen and elastin synthesis, strengthening connective tissue, improving skin and tendon structure. It enhances angiogenesis and microcirculation, improving oxygen and nutrient delivery to the cells. It acts as a potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory, protecting tissues from oxidative damage and reduced swelling. It supports stem cell activation and tissue remodeling, helping damaged areas regenerate with higher quality tissue instead of scar tissue. It even improves wound contraction and closure, accelerating the physical sealing of injuries. On a genetic level, GHK upregulates more than 4,000 genes associated with regeneration, while downregulating over 1,000 pro-inflammatory genes. So you're not just healing, you're optimizing in a way your body manages the healing process. The craftsman analogy. BPC is the foreman directing the crew. TB is the architect building the structure. Then GHK is the master craftsman who comes in and finishes the work to perfection. He refines the details, aligns the beams, strengthens the foundation. He's not just patching the hole, he's rebuilding it stronger and more resilient than before. That's why GHK is so important, not just for acute healing, but for long-term structural integrity. Things like joint stability, connective tissue density, and even skin health. GHK has a remarkable range of benefits on tissue and systemic effects. These include connective tissue remodeling, improving the alignment and cross-linking of these collagen fibers, vascular health, promoting new capillary formation and protecting against vessel and oxidative damage, skin repair, increasing the firmness, elasticity, even tone by stimulating those fibroblast activities. And the final is the anti-aging and cosmetic rejuvenation, smoothing fine lines, improving texture, reducing oxidative stress in the skin. And in animal studies, GHK was even shown to have those neuroprotective effects in a post-stroke model, reducing brain damage and even improving when administered after the event. So really mitigating the event of brain damage in those studies. That speaks to how systemically powerful this peptide can be, well beyond the cosmetic world where it was most commonly used. In fact, that is where it was only really used and talked about when I first published the SuperHuman healing protocols, where I included my protocols with GHK for healing. And it was the first published protocols around those. And this type of research is what led me to do my testing that I'd done in the years prior and become to have this as a critical component in the methodology. Post that is when the Glow and Clo blends came out, where then people started actually putting those together, and we started seeing that because it was just primarily this anti-aging and cosmetic product. When we talk administration and delivery, GHK can be delivered in several ways depending on your goal. Topical. Yep. Most commonly used in skin applications. Applied as a 1% or 2% serum or cream, it penetrates well and stimulates local collagen and elastin production. You can think about that also with using shockwave therapy that can also drive that deeper and open up those membranes. Getting a little ahead of myself. Subcutaneous or intramuscular injection. Used for systemic or targeted repair. This route activates the peptide throughout the connective and vascular tissue. It's also used in microneedling or mesotherapy for skin remodeling and localized regeneration, especially when paired with red light therapy or other amplifying modalities. Because GHK is a naturally occurring peptide with rapid cellular uptake, its half-life is short, but its downstream genetic effects last much longer. So let's talk about dosage guidelines. Typical systemic dosing for GHK is in the range of 3,000 to 5,000 micrograms per day. This is often divided into two smaller doses if administered by injection. For local treatment, dosing can vary depending on the area being targeted. So topicals, not that familiar with, so we'll skip over that. So in the context of the RAM method, GHK adds another layer to the repair ecosystem. BPC directing the crews, TB500 expanding the infrastructure and accelerating movement, and GHK perfects the craftsmanship and strengthens the outcome. It not only enhances structural integrity, it also improves the overall environment, reducing inflammation, optimizing vascular flow, restoring cellular communication. GHK transforms short-term healing into long-term regeneration. Here's the big takeaway I want you to have with GHK. It isn't just a healing peptide, it's a re-engineering peptide. It rebuilds the tissue, polishes the detail, and upgrades the system that keeps the cells young, strong, and responsive. It's the link between recovery and rejuvenation. And that's why in the regenerative amplification stack, GHK is indispensable. Now that we've covered those, the foreman, the architect, the master craftsman, let's move to the last one in the healing piece, the firefighter, KPV, lysine, proline, valine. What is KPV and why is it important? KPV is a small, naturally occurring tripeptide. It's just 3 amino acids long. That comes from a larger hormone called alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone. I know, a little long. You can also call it alpha MSH. And while alpha MSH has a wide range of effects in the body, the short KPV fragment is the part responsible for its anti-inflammatory and immune modulating activity. You can think of alpha MSH as a full-length instruction manual. KPV is the single precise paragraph that tells your immune system, calm down and focus on healing. So the mechanisms of action. KPV works by binding melanocortin receptors, which are found on the immune cells throughout the body. When KPV activates those receptors, it shifts the immune system from pro-inflammatory, overreactive state into a controlled, healing-oriented state. That means reducing inflammatory cytokines like IL-6 and TNF-alpha. It increases anti-inflammatory signals like IL-10. It prevents mast cell degranulation, which is one of the main drivers behind redness, swelling, and allergic-type responses. In short, KPV doesn't suppress your immune system, it balances it. It tells the body, stop flooding the area. The fire is under control. Now we can rebuild. So that's where the firefighter analogy is from. If we return to the construction site model, BPC and TB having organized the crews and built the infrastructure, GHK has strengthened the structure and improved the craftsmanship. Now, KPV is the firefighter who keeps the site safe. He makes sure sparks don't flare back up. He calms the chaos, clears the smoke, and keeps inflammation from spreading around surrounding areas. Without KPV, your immune response can overshoot, like firefighters flooding an entire neighborhood instead of just the burning building. Let's talk these primary benefits. KPV provides both local and systemic benefits. Potent anti-inflammatory activity across tissue, immune regulation, especially valuable in the autoimmune and inflammatory conditions, protection of your mucosal surfaces, including gut, lungs, and the oral cavity, supporting the skin barrier repair, and reducing of redness and irritation. Synergy with BPC 157 for gut healing and systemic inflammation control is massive. For athletes, it's particularly useful during periods of high training stress, chronic inflammation, or when systemic recovery is slowed by an overactive immune signaling. So your applications in the gut and mucosal health are obvious. One of the most impressive features of KPV is how well it works on that mucosal tissue, the surface that forms your internal barriers. In the gut, KPV restores the epithelial lining, reducing inflammation in the intestinal wall, and help repair that leaky gut by tightening those cellular junctions. That's why pairing KPV with BPC 157 is such a powerful combination. BPC drives repair and angiogenesis. KPV calms inflammation and stabilizes the environment so that repair can take place without interference. It's also useful for respiratory issues, sinus inflammation, eczema, psoriasis, and any chronic inflammatory condition of the skin or those mucosal membranes. Talking administration and delivery, KPV can be taken orally, subcutaneously, topically, just depending on what the target tissue is. Oral delivery primarily benefits the gut and that systemic inflammation. Subcutaneous injection offers broader systemic anti-inflammatory effects. And then topical use can help calm localized inflammation of the skin. Because it's a small peptide, it absorbs quickly and clears cleanly. From a dosage standpoint, KPV is around 250 to 500 micrograms once or twice daily, depending on the severity of inflammation. In combination protocol blends such as the CLO blend, dosing generally mirrors the BPC and TB 500 at 350 to 500 mcg per day. And just like BPC, consistent twice daily signaling is often more effective than a larger single dose. That frequency keeps the inflammatory response balanced and steady throughout the day. From a systemic integration standpoint, KPV's role in Regenerative Amplification Model is to create the healing environment. BPC tells the body where to repair, TB brings in the materials and builds new pathways, and GHK refines that construction and strengthens the tissue, while KPV ensures the site stays clean, safe, and inflammatory-free so that everything else can keep working efficiently. It also prevents one of the biggest obstacles in healing, chronic, low-grade inflammation, which can silently stall recovery for weeks or months if not controlled. In summary, I like to think about KPV not as the builder, it's the regulator, the overseer that keeps everything in check. It's the peptide that maintains balance. It keeps your immune system from turning your recovery site into a war zone. It creates the calm, stable environment that true regeneration requires. And when you stack KPV with BPC, TB, GHK, you have that full blueprint for accelerated healing, signaling, structure, craftsmanship, and control. That's the foundation of the CLO blend and why it is such a cornerstone of the RAM model. All right, this seems to be a good spot to wrap up part 1 of this series. So part 2, I will pick up and finish the discussion on these biochemical signals, diving deeper into growth hormone, IGF, growth hormone releasing peptides, before then moving into the amplifying modalities, the acoustic and electrical pulse fields, light therapy, and the unique ways these can interact and build upon peptide therapy. And as I get into this longer form content again, I would really appreciate your help on sharing this video, sharing your feedback in the comments to let me know what topics, insights, how can I do this better to be able to deliver valuable information to you. And don't forget to check out chrisduffin.com for ebooks on these very topics or accessing devices and peptides discussed in the series.